Here.
Now, last year, when talking about Global Entrepreneurship Week, because Idea for Africa is among the people organizing, you mentioned that you wanted entrepreneurs to take on entrepreneurship as a career, to become job creators. 1 year later, we're talking about transformation entrepreneurship. Help us understand what has guided your thoughts over the last year.
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say that Idea for Africa is national host of the Global Entrepreneurship Week. So it was our idea to actually bring this platform in Rwanda.
Right.
And last year we focused on the constraints in entrepreneurship. And this year we wanted to focus on transformation in entrepreneurship because we figured that in Rwanda there is a lot of emphasis on subsistence entrepreneurship,
right,
just making money. And we wanted to actually inspire our young people that you can make money also by changing the lives of people
right,
around you. And so that was more from that place that we, yeah.
All right. So the essence of social entrepreneurship as
exactly.
such. So in essence, because most of this is normally to scale, we need to have a collaborative approach, right, from different entrepreneurs. How has progress been on the same?
Well, last year that's when I started working with Idea for Africa, and I didn't actually have a well-rounded understanding of the entrepreneurial ecosystem
right,
in Rwanda. And now what I figured is actually a lot of sectors in the ecosystem are willing to be part of this. However, a lot of young people don't know where to get there, how to get to policymakers, how to get to investors, right, to other stakeholders. So we've been acting as a bridge for that gap.
All right.
And so, yeah.
Okay, which brings me now to the conversation on access to finance, because we're seeing a lot more investors coming on board, but the bridge, as you mentioned, between the entrepreneurs and the finance is an issue. I mentioned it at the top of the show. Access to finance is moving lower because in the priority chain, people are now concerned about research, collaboration, skills, and innovation. But help us understand what the entrepreneurial space is prioritizing now as needs for businesses.
I think right now what we are prioritizing is the finance, actually,
right,
as
still
Idea
finance
for Africa, because it's always the first problem
okay,
of entrepreneurs. So how can we actually make even policymakers, like how can policies facilitate the ventures of entrepreneurs when they endeavor into changing the lives of them for themselves and for people around them.
Right.
And so it's still access to finance. And we've been reaching out to banks and asking them, can you actually host events where you make it easy for the
right,
young people and for other entrepreneurs, whatever target market we are looking at, can you make it easier for them by hosting events? And so for us, again, that's what we look at what the entrepreneurs are telling us, and we're young people. I'm a young person myself. Right. And then we want to reach out to those people to ask them, the organizations, institutions that we are talking about.
All right. Have you noted any element of prioritization even from the financiers into where they put their money? Or traditionally, agriculture was the one that got most of the financing, but now we are seeing a lot more innovative ideas miss the mark.
Yeah. In the opening ceremony of the Global Entrepreneurship Week, we had Patrick Puchana,
right,
and he was sharing with us how his journey in Tap and Go and the transport system.
Right.
But I've always believed, and my team also does, that agriculture is still, we are an economic based on agriculture.
Right.
And if you look at the US, they've been, that wealthy because of agriculture to begin with. And so we still want to, our young people, so Idea for Africa, we usually work with high school students, and we still want them to choose what they do based on the society's needs. And still it's agriculture because a lot of the students we work with live outside of Kigali,
right,
in the countryside. So we still want them to know how can you actually make it have a profit even doing agriculture.
Right.
And we've partnered with Deloitte, and so we want to have those trainings with high school students where it's still agriculture that we want them to have more knowledge in.
All right.
Yeah.
The reason why I asked that is because, for example, what Rwanda is prioritizing now has been mice.
Yes.
And we had an individual from the service industry who said that when they go to the banks, they want something tangible, from the service industry to tell them, okay, this is how an event is done, but it's not quantifiable in economic terms, and they've been suffering because they don't know how to package it. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this?
That's something we've actually noticed as well. It's you have to find a way to quantify it, and it's not the case in Rwanda. It's really not the case.
Right.
And that's also an issue that we've tried to focus on, and again bringing in the stakeholders that are concerned in this.
Okay.
Yeah.
You had a session where you tried to explain to businesses how to make their businesses investment ready. How was the progress in uptake of that particular mentality? Because we're seeing people with the idea, they think that will translate economically, but that's not always the case. Their needs might not meet the entrepreneur's ideas.
Yeah. So making investors
business ready. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know. I think for having making business ready, you have to train them for since younger phase.
Right.
You know, I think a lot of businesses aren't ready in terms of investment because it seems as though it's something that they rush in, and we have taxes that are are just hitting them very hard sometimes, and so it's a lot of people get into that space without knowing what they are getting themselves into. And so that's what causes that issue afterwards.
All right, let's talk about sustainability. Now, the Afrexim Bank earlier on and an Indian delegation from Rwanda, when they came, they had almost the same thought. They put in a lot of money into budding businesses, but the sustainability, 1 to 2 years, you find that a business that is not necessarily with a 5-year plan doesn't execute past the first or second year. So that is a thought now for Idea for Africa to ensure sustainability for more than that particular set of time.
Yes. So Idea for Africa, as I said earlier, we work with high school students, right? And so what we do, we have 13 to 18. That's our target market, the young people. And so we have them go through a training, but then we follow up with them. So if it's a product or a service, they have to go and test it on the ground, and they have to come back. And we have to follow up with them for more than the whole time they're in high school. And so that way we ensure the sustainability because we also give them support, whether funding them and connecting them to the right people depending on their business.
Let's talk about now the gender gap in entrepreneurship. I know this can go on for about 2 hours, but women entrepreneurs have a harder time accessing financial to social capital. In many instances, their gender even influences their credit terms. But we've moved away from that, and all we're talking about removing the institutional influences on gender and access to capital or entrepreneurship. What are the low-hanging fruits to that particular conversation?
Actually, so this year we wanted to bring in Mijay Prof in the panel discussion at the opening ceremony because we found out that that's the case. But then we brought in someone from the African Development Bank who told us how it's actually in the rate in Rwanda of women entrepreneurs keeps rising, and how the African Development Bank is really committed to invest millions in women entrepreneurs. And so I think projects like that and having development partners like African Development Bank is the way to go. Now, but we have Rwanda that has mandatory by law. We have the higher representation in cabinet, higher representation in parliament, but this might not replicate outside the border. But whatever we discuss in Rwanda goes outside the border. So how do you work that out? Well, in Idea for Africa, we haven't figured that out yet because our focus is, first of all, in Rwanda. However, we want to have, again, a platform where we've tried to invite Patricia Tosima. And she wanted, because she always talks about social entrepreneurship and it would be a great regional presence in that panel discussion. So we've tried to have her, for her to shed a light on how it is for young entrepreneurs, for women entrepreneurs, and whatnot. So.
All right. As a final point, let's just have a slight comparison. Now, all the companies that are dubbed as the best, all the countries that are dubbed the best in entrepreneurship around the world, Germany, Japan, Switzerland, they're synonymous with well-developed legal frameworks, constitutional governance, and all those that are here. But are we able to map out in Rwanda what could be our selling point to budding businesses, maybe for the mid to long term?
Yeah, I think for us, for the longest time, what set us apart was the fact that we had a government that was really enabling, that was really willing to invest in entrepreneurs. And in other places, you find that it's from bottom up. And here it's worked the other way around, where from our president and even the government, he's influencing other people, the society, to think the same way. And then from there, we have people who are coming up with the same mindset and trying to influence others, including Idea for Africa. And I think for us, that's what sets us apart. And if we could also increase the on-ground work, from having NGOs and entrepreneurs themselves, like Patrick Puchana, who are creating jobs for other people, and then that's how we can set ourselves apart. Whether it's again in agriculture or thinking about other innovative and technology.
Ideas.
Things like that. But to come back to your point of the regional entrepreneurship, increasing the mindset in our region, I would say that we have to increase our discussions and the conversations that we're having about this regionally. So having Rwanda and Kenya and Uganda and Burundi have conversations like that, where we look at how can we increase, foster an entrepreneurial culture not only in Rwanda, but how can we help each other, how can we challenge each other, and you need agricultural services. We have these students, or we have these people who are, exchange, having programs like that, even universities in high schools. And that's one of the things I think I mentioned last year that we are doing, is that we have a competition every 6 months, and the winners, not only do they get support from us, but they also get to go in another place like Uganda and then see how entrepreneurship is done there. And that's how you can actually start to challenge people to think in a broader sense entrepreneurially in their region.
All right. And, absolutely perfect. Thank you so much for stopping by. I've been speaking to Pamela Munyana, who's the Country Director for Idea for Africa.